A devastating crash in D.C. And now the political fallout on the president's remarks from the White House. We'll have the latest from Washington. And we'll talk with Congressman Jim Banks and Andre Carson on the proposed federal funding freeze and the fight over immigration policy. Plus, we get reaction from both sides on Governor Mike Braun's first State of the State address. Now on this week's edition of In Focus. Tragedy in the sky over Washington, D.C. this week, and we learned at least one of the victims, Asra Hussein, was from Indiana. This is a former Indiana mayor and cabinet secretary pushes back on some of the controversial remarks from the president in the wake of this deadly crash. Hannah Brandt has more today from Washington.
In the wake of the devastating D.C. plane crash, President Donald Trump is promising answers.
We'll get to the bottom of it.
The National Transportation Safety Board is leading an investigation into how a U.S. Army helicopter collided with an American Airlines plane.
We do not know enough facts to be able to rule in or out human factor, mechanical factors. That is part of the NTSB investigative process.
Investigators say there are no survivors among the 64 people who were on the plane or 3 soldiers on the helicopter. And Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says their families deserve to know why.
We commit to them that we are going to get to the bottom of this investigation, not in 3 years, not in 4 years, but as quickly as possible.
President Trump says he doesn't know exactly how this deadly crash happened, but he suggested the Biden administration and its diversity policies could be to blame.
We're going to look into that and we're going to see, but certainly for an air traffic controller, we want the brightest, the smartest, the sharpest.
President Trump argues diversity policies go against that objective, specifically slamming a previous FAA policy that called diversity integral to safety.
I don't think so. I think it's just the opposite.
And he attacked former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg for how he led the department.
He's run it right into the ground with his diversity.
He was asked why he believes diversity hiring contributed to the accident.
Because I have common sense, okay?
And today, President Trump signed a memo ordering an assessment of aviation safety and an elevation of competence over DEI. In Washington, I'm Hannah Brandt.
Now, in response to all of that, former Secretary Buttigieg said, quote, "Despicable. As families grieve, President Trump should be leading, not lying." He said, "We put safety first, drove down close calls, grew air traffic control, and had 0 commercial airline crashes on our watch." He said, time for the president to show actual leadership and explain what he'll do to prevent this from happening again. And we'll talk more about it with our panel coming up as well. Meantime, the issue of diversity and DEI policy was also a topic this week in Governor Mike Braun's first State of the State address, which also touched on immigration, economic development, and his plans to cut property taxes. State House reporter Hannah Adamson has a recap and reaction from both sides of the aisle.
The state of the state is strong because Hoosiers are strong.
During his first State of the State, Governor Mike Braun highlighted what he's accomplished over the past few weeks to make good on campaign promises like lowering healthcare costs, increasing public safety, and making universal school choice a reality.
My agenda is about delivering freedom and opportunity for all Hoosiers.
The governor's speech primarily focused on property taxes, sharing the stories of everyday Hoosiers in the audience struggling to make ends meet.
And here with us tonight are Rob and Stephanie from Greenwood. They lived in the same house for 27 years, and since 2021, their property tax bill has more than doubled.
The governor emphasized how the Indiana Senate has made his property tax plan their top priority bill this session, and how he's working with Republican leaders to get that bill across the finish line.
It'll have an impact on local governments, and I realize that, but taxpayers are struggling, and we have to put their needs first.
Republican leadership echoing that sentiment.
The idea of people losing their homes because they are retired on a single income that doesn't go up when inflation goes up, that's reprehensible to us.
Details will need to be fleshed out, but it's great when there's alignment, and now we just go to work on getting it all done.
But State House Democrats pushed back, calling Braun's property tax plan a farce that will hurt local governments and take funds from essential services.
So Governor Braun, if we're serious about keeping Hoosiers in their homes, where is the plan?
It's a bait and switch attempt for Republicans to blame cities and counties for rising costs and then run for re-election on cutting taxes.
As for efforts to lower healthcare costs, Governor Braun pushed lawmakers to pass a House bill that would require historic price transparency, fight healthcare fraud, and end surprise billing in Indiana for good. That bill is currently still in committee. Reporting from the Indiana State House, I'm Hannah Adamson.
Hannah, thank you. Not everyone was happy with Governor Braun's address or his first 2 weeks in office. A rally was held outside of where the governor delivered his speech. The Indiana Legislative Black Caucus organized that event, calling into question the governor's decision to end DEI policies.
What critics miss about the fundamental purpose of DEI is it's not about lowering standards. It's about leveling the playing field and making sure that everyone, regardless of their background, has a shot.
Democrats also responding to another topic the governor mentioned in his address, immigration. We spoke with State Rep Victoria Garcia Wilburn about some of the governor's executive orders on immigration enforcement this past week.
We are hopeful that lawmakers inside the State House can continue to stay focused on the issues that affect Hoosiers' everyday lives.
Governor Braun also saying he'll authorize the Indiana National Guard to cooperate with ICE. Meantime, this week, the Indianapolis police chief was front and center on this very issue of immigration, responding to criticism from Indiana Senator Jim Banks, who took issue with the chief's statements that enforcing federal immigration law wasn't their department's role.
I do think it's unfortunate the police chief in Indianapolis, if any local law enforcement agency would try to block ICE or the federal government law enforcement agencies from these efforts to deport violent criminals, I think there should be a repercussion for that. In fact, I'm looking at ways that we can block federal grants that go to law enforcement agencies like the city of Indianapolis if they block those efforts. So I think that's unfortunate. Donald Trump was elected with a mandate to deport violent criminals and address the over 10 million illegals who came into this country. And he's doing everything that he can right off the bat to make sure that that happens.
To be clear, the chief of police there isn't saying he's looking to block the efforts, just that it's not their role. You'd seek to cut off their funding
if they're standing in the way of not assisting the ICE and federal agencies from deporting violent illegals from this country, I think there should be a repercussion for that.
The argument that IMPD does not cooperate with federal authorities, to me, is not true. For the totality of IMPD to enforce a federal law specifically related to immigration, we would all have to be deputized or provided that authority through the U.S. government, which we do not have.
The sheriff in Hamilton County is saying that they're going to assist in these efforts. Why would the city of Indianapolis not be a part of it? Why would the city of Indianapolis say something that's the opposite of the sheriff in Hamilton County? That tells me that they're not serious about these efforts that we should be serious about to get murderers and violent criminals who came to this country illegally out of our country.
Now, we should point out sheriff's offices, as opposed to local police departments, are generally the agencies that touch base with ICE based on those they have already under arrest in their jails. I also spoke with Senator Banks about the federal funding pause that made news this week before it was held up by a federal judge.
I mean, I think Hoosiers see this as a common sense effort. Keep in mind, too, that the executive order was very short term, I think like 7 or 10 days, instructing these agencies to come back and report to the president that the taxpayer dollars that they're spending are being used in an accountable and responsible way. And I think that when we have a $35 trillion national debt, we have waste, fraud, and abuse all through the federal government. Thank you, President Trump, for taking seriously how our taxpayer dollars are being spent. I'm not concerned at all about how this would affect anyone in Indiana, because if agencies are using this money in the right way, then that money is going to be released to them. But if they're wasting money, or if money is being abused, taxpayer dollars are being abused, then we should definitely take a look at that.
And on Wednesday, right before the OMB rescinded that funding freeze memo, I also spoke with Congressman Andre Carson from Indianapolis.
They help vulnerable people, like young people, the elderly. And the programs under attack are overwhelmingly popular with Hoosiers and supported by the American people, especially the people who voted for Donald Trump.
The Trump administration's been moving very quickly to enact its agenda, including some of these controversial executive orders, the federal funding pause, and executive orders on many other topics. Some have criticized Democrats for responding too slowly to this onslaught of policy from the administration. Do you think your party needs to be doing more at this point?
I think we're doing more. I think what happened is this happened while Congress is on recess, which was very strategic. So you have many folks who are not just traveling, but they're in their districts working. I think what President Trump likes to do is he likes to create chaos and come in to save the day. And so a lot of this is political theater and pageantry, but at the expense of who? At the expense of the American people.
My interview there with Congressman Andre Carson. Meantime, some developing news this week as Indiana's Attorney General now faces new disciplinary complaints over his claims about an Indianapolis doctor. AG Todd Rokita made several claims about Dr. Caitlin Bernard in 2022 in the wake of the Supreme Court's decision on abortion rights. She discussed providing an abortion to a 10-year-old rape survivor with the Indianapolis Star, and Rokita accused her of violating privacy laws and went on Fox News to call the doctor, quote, an abortion activist acting as a doctor with a history of failing to report. The Indiana Medical Licensing Board eventually reprimanded Dr. Bernard, while Rokita signed agreements saying some of his comments were out of line. He still denied wrongdoing. Now, in a new complaint from the Supreme Court's Disciplinary Commission, Rokita is accused of making false statements, misrepresenting the Supreme Court, and contradicting sworn statements. Friday, Rokita accused the commission of playing politics, saying, quote, this matter continues to be revisited by politically passionate people who've weaponized the process, in his words, going well beyond what's fair and appropriate. All right, up next, we'll talk about all of this week's news with our panel, including their reaction to President Trump's controversial week in Washington. And we get more reaction to Governor Braun's State of the State address. Stick around. We'll be right back after this.